Okay, let's work on some basic banjo concepts for clawhammer frailing style banjo. So the first thing to talk about is the tuning. For these lessons, I am in C tuning, double C tuning. So the notes from the 5th string, which is the highest string up on top, are G, then the lowest one is C, middle G, then another C, and a D on the outside. And so that's the way I usually talk about the strings. And again, just to refresh on the banjo, if you haven't seen any other lessons and you're just starting out, the lowest string is the one next to the top. So the lowest one in pitch is the C string. The highest one is the one on top here, that's the 5th string, that goes only to this extra peg. So there are a few conceptual things that are a little tricky to grasp right away, and that's that low to high. So going low to high on the strings, it's C, G, C, D, and G on top. And then on the fingerboard, on the fretboard, going low to high towards the body of the instrument is higher, towards the fingerboard is lower. And so the basic idea with the right hand, the way I was taught, was to kind of act like you're holding a pen or a pencil inside your fingers, kind of like you're making a karate chop almost, but like you've got a pen in there and you don't want to let the pen fall. And I usually rest my thumb on the 5th string if I'm not using it for something else. And the basic lick is 1, 2, and they call that often bum, diddy, bum, diddy, bum, diddy, bum, diddy. And so there's space between the 1 and 2. There's another and that you're actually not playing. And so your fingers only ever play on the numbers, and your thumb only ever plays on the and. So to get started, it's actually pretty easy to get going. So you're going bum, diddy, bum, diddy. 1, 2, and 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 1, 2, and. And so for right now, I'm using my first finger on my right hand, and I'm hitting pretty much all the strings each time I'm hitting. 1, 2, and 1, 2, and 1, 2, and 1, 2, and. But there's a note in that that's not quite right, because you have this D note on the outside, and that does not fit in a C chord. So to make your first chord, you need to play the 2nd fret on the D string. And that gives you that nice full C chord. Bum, diddy, bum, diddy, bum, diddy, bum, diddy, bum, diddy, bum, diddy, bum. And that's pretty much all there is to it right off the bat. You know, it can get as complex as you want to make it. But for starters, that's the main concept. It's just this bum diddy rhythm with some chords, some things going on with the left hand that we'll get into. I'm going to teach a few chords now, and we'll get into a tune on down the road. But so for now, you've got your C chord. And for a banjo player, it's good to know that that's also, you can call that chord 1. So in this tuning, this shape, you can call 1. And we can get more into that as we go down the line, but I don't think we need to dive into theory right now. But it will be good to know that down the road. So we'll call this C or 1. And I use my 2nd finger to make that chord. So 2nd finger, 2nd fret, D string. And then the next chord is an F chord or a 4 chord. And that chord, I use my first finger, 2nd fret of the G string, skip a string, 3rd finger, 3rd fret of the D. So I've got the C is open, the G I have the 2nd fret down, the next C I skip, and I have my 3rd finger at the 3rd fret of the D. And that makes an F chord or a 4 chord. And so, in practice, you can go ahead and start to switch between those chords. C, bum, diddy, bum, diddy, F, bum, diddy, bum, diddy, C. But then we're going to be looking for one more chord, and that chord that we need is the G, or the 5 chord. And all you got to do to make that chord is cover up the C strings, both at the 2nd fret. So 2nd fret, I'm using my middle finger, 2nd fret low C, skip the G, 3rd finger, 2nd fret, the high C, and the D's open. And so on that, sorry, I lost my train of thought there. Oh, and that's your G, or your 5 chord. And so the last thing I want to talk about in this is that and so that's your G chord, or your 5 chord, when your fingers make that form. And so the last thing I want to talk about in this lesson is why I'm using which fingers I am. And I think I've kind of finally figured this out. I used to think it was arbitrary, but this is kind of my chording position, or my first position. And so when I've got my middle finger there instead of my first finger, I find it much easier to go from this middle finger to the 1st and 3rd finger for the F chord. So I can almost get that F chord down without moving my middle finger. I mean, really, I can get it down and not even have to move my middle finger. And then for getting from the C to the G, all you got to do is push that middle finger all the way down to the bottom, and that 3rd finger kind of falls into place. So I find that motion really easy too. Way easier than going from this first finger to kind of have to think about a whole other chord. I find that motion a lot easier. So hopefully that helps you. Let's go through the chords one more time. We've got the C, diddy, C, C, diddy, C, diddy, then F, diddy, F, diddy, F, diddy, F, diddy, and G, diddy, G, diddy, G, diddy, G, and back to C, diddy, C, diddy, C, diddy, C. So those are your basic chords and the basic strumming pattern in the open C or double C tuning. And next time we'll work on tune. Hope you enjoy it.